My name is Carolyn. I'm 68 years old. I'm a widow, and I live alone in a simple house here in Portland. I have hands calloused with life, and a memory that carries more than I would like. I've heard a lot over the years, but there is a question that never left my mind. Why were all the cards blocked, just on the day my daughter-in-law and I couldn't pay for lunch? Have you ever been there? To feel like a shadow in the restaurant, with the waiter waiting, the bill on the table, and no card swiping? It may seem like just a banking problem, but sometimes it's much more than that. It is the reflection of years of silence, of gestures not valued, of a whole life placed in the name of others. Many people watch this video trying to understand what leads a mother to make such a radical decision, and what happens next when the children find out that the bank in the house has closed. Today I'm going to tell you. No screaming, no anger, only the truth, because the silence they ignored. It was the same one I used to turn the key to my story. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. The day after that sentence that pierced my chest like a knife, my phone rang. It was my son, Ryan. He was at an expensive restaurant in Lake Oswego with his wife and mother-in-law, and none of the cards worked, neither his nor hers. The bill? More than $200. And the waiter was already impatient, ready to call the management. The desperation in his voice. I'll never forget it. But what no one knew, not even him, was that it was not a mistake by the bank. That was the beginning of my answer. If you've ever felt like you've been taken for granted, if you've ever been treated like you're just a bill paid at the end of the month. So this story is also yours. If you can, leave your like and subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a silent hug for those who have already cried in secret, because telling it still hurts. And having you here with me already makes me feel a little stronger to continue. At that time, my routine was simple. I woke up every day at 6:30, even without an alarm clock. The body gets used to it. I drank my black, sugar-free coffee, sitting on the porch, listening to the sounds of my garden. There was a couple of squirrels who always appeared near the fence. Then I'd put on my coat and walk the quiet streets of my neighborhood in Portland. I always passed by the same stretch of Killingsworth Street, where Mrs. Abigail of the flower shop would wave up to me and say, "Carolyn, you're still going to outlive everyone else on this block." I smiled, but inside I felt older than I looked. After the walk, I used to stop by the community library. I like books, but even more silence. And there, no one interrupted me. On the way back, I bought a few things at Winco Foods. Vegetables, bread, coffee, a small dessert for me. No extravagance. Always with the bag on my arm and the expense spreadsheet on my head. Because as much as retirement was enough to live on, I knew at any moment my son would call asking for just a help. In the beginning, it was a small thing. Ryan lost his job at the IT company. He was shaken. He said he was going to get back on his feet. He asked me to help with the rent for 3 months. "Mom, I pay you. It's just a little push." I didn't hesitate. I gave the money on the same day. Then came Dana's car. She needed a safe vehicle to go to work in Lake Oswego. She asked to use my name in the financing because hers didn't have good enough credit. I signed it, and I started paying the installments as well. They said they would give it back to me, but they never returned it. Birthdays, dinners, Christmas gifts, everything ended up on my card. A $300 dinner here, a night at a spa there, streaming subscription, Uber Eats, online courses. The charges were piling up, and I pretended I didn't see it. You know when we think, it's my son. One day he will realize, that's that. I thought that every day. They lived in a modern condominium in the Pearl District. Beautiful. Mirrored elevator. Balcony overlooking the river. I was happy for them, really. I have always led a simple life, and it was nice to see my son living comfortably. But little by little, I realized that that comfort had my name engraved on the walls. They got used to the idea that I was there to make everything easier. And the worst, they started to act as if this was my obligation. There was a day that I never forget. It was Dana's birthday. I was asked to book a trendy Italian restaurant. I made the reservation, paid the entrance, bought a new dress to go in order. When I arrived, the table was full. Friends, relatives, acquaintances of hers whom I had never seen. I sat in the corner, almost out of the conversation, and when the bill arrived, they didn't even look at me. Ryan just reached out and said, "It's on your card, isn't it, Mom?" I smiled. A bitter smile, but no one noticed. At this moment, let me take a break. Because maybe you've been through it. Maybe you gave everything and, in the end, became just a number in the account of others. Ever feel like no matter how much you help, no one actually sees you? If this touched you, comment here with a, "I've lived it," or "It touched me." Sometimes, knowing that we are not alone is what prevents the heart from hardening. Returning, I have always been very respected in the neighborhood. In the market, in the library, in the flower shop. People listened to me, asked for advice. They treated me with affection. But within my own family, I became a resource. A kind of transfer app, you know? Quiet, always available. Without a face, without affection. They never asked if I needed anything. I was never offered help with the garden, or asked how my health was going. One day, I had a small fall at home, and I called Ryan, just to talk, to calm down. He answered in a hurry, said he was in the middle of a round of golf with friends. "I'll call later, Mom." He never cared. I didn't insist. I sat on the couch, holding the cell phone turned off in my hand. It's strange how we get used to being forgotten. How do you learn to be grateful for crumbs, just so you don't lose the little that is left? And I did it with the silly hope that one day he would notice, that I would go back to being that boy who held my hand at the market and said, "You are my heroine." But this boy grew up, and he forgot who created him. Until any Sunday became the beginning of everything. And it's about this Sunday that I'll tell you in the next part, because it was there, between a coffee served and a phrase said with mockery, that I stopped being the silent mother, and I began to become the woman they never expected to face. That Sunday started like any other. I had woken up early, prepared my lemon cake, an old recipe from my mother, and placed it on a tray with a simple bow. I like to take care of the details. I went to their apartment, as I did every last weekend of the month. Dana opened the door. He was wearing sweatshirts, playing with his cell phone, and barely looked at me. He just said hi, with his mouth almost closed, and went back to the couch. Ryan came later, gave me a hurried kiss on the forehead, but was more interested in the basketball game that was on TV. I put the cake in the kitchen, took off my coat, and went to prepare coffee. When it was time to serve, I called everyone to the table with that little way of mine, the one that I cultivated with years of care. "Let's eat while it's fresh." That's when I heard, without them knowing that I was nearby. Dana, laughing, said to her friend who was on a video call, "She brought a cake as a gift. Is that what she considers a treat?" The other woman's laughter echoed through the room. I stood still. A piece of me wanted to come in there and ask what was so funny. But another piece, the oldest, the most tired, only returned to the kitchen in silence. I cut a slice for myself, smiled politely, and ate with a tight throat. I spent the rest of lunch listening to the two talk about investments, travel, promotions. When I tried to comment that maybe we should all review spending, Ryan chuckled and said, "Here comes my mom with this scarcity mentality." Dana completed with a, "It's just that in her time everything was difficult, right?" As if I were a useless relic, a reminder of an ugly time that no one wants to remember anymore. And yet, I kept smiling. He said he understood, that young people today had more pressures, that everything was more expensive, more demanding. I tried to convince myself of that too, so as not to face what was obvious, that they no longer saw me as a mother, but as a polite backrest, a shadow that paid the bills and silenced the pain. I began to notice the impatient looks when I spoke, the cell phones in my hand when I tried to tell some old story, the whispers when I went to the bathroom. And even with all this, I still took desserts, did favors, transferred money without them having to ask, because I thought, silly that I am, that one day they would see it, that they would realize that behind that white-haired woman there was a story, a strength, a love that only asked for a little gratitude. But what I heard on that Sunday afternoon would change everything, and it wasn't the tone, nor the laughter, it was the phrase itself, because when someone says out loud what you're afraid to think, then there is no going back. Do you want to know what she said? So get ready, because her words tore me inside, and even so, it was what I needed to wake up. It was an ordinary evening, one of those in which the light enters through the kitchen window, as if nothing in the world could go wrong. Dana had invited some friends over for coffee at home. I gave in, of course. I prepared shortbread cookies, fresh coffee, adjusted the living room cushions, and left the table set with my old crockery set, the one I only use on special occasions. The girls arrived with loud laughter and cell phones in hand, taking pictures of everything. I even thought it was funny at first. Ryan was also at home, a little scattered, sitting on the couch with his cell phone on his lap. But there, I went back and forth, replenishing cups, offering more sugar, doing what I always did, taking care. At one point, I went to get more napkins from the kitchen. The door was ajar, and it was there, at that moment when we don't want to hear, but hear, that everything changed. One of the friends, laughing, asked, "And this beautiful house? Is it really hers, or do you pay the rent?" And Dana, with the naturalness of someone who talks about the weather forecast, replied, "It only serves to pay our bills." And he laughed. And then I heard more laughter, including Ryan's. A muffled laugh, almost embarrassed, but it was there. I froze. I stood with my hands on top of the napkin drawer, feeling my skin freeze. The cup I was holding slipped a little and made a slight noise in the sink. I returned to the room as if nothing had happened. Smile on his face, biscuits in hand, no tears. I sat in a chair in the corner and stood there, listening to the conversations as if watching a movie of which he is no longer a part. That night, I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, repeating the phrase in my head, as if trying to understand where so much coldness came from. "It is only good for paying our bills." It wasn't the phrase itself that hurt the most. That's the way they said it. Certainty, the absence of shame, as if that were the absolute truth. And my son's laughter, that laughter pierced me, because it's one thing to be mistreated by those who came into your life later. It's quite another to be humiliated by those you created with your own hands. That morning, lying alone, I didn't cry. I didn't even rebel. I didn't scream. I just felt something new. A kind of anger that does not destroy, but organizes. Who doesn't scream, but thinks. For the first time in many years, I didn't try to justify what I heard. I didn't think they're tired, or, she didn't mean that. I accepted that. For them, I had stopped being a person, and I became a function, a useful, quiet, and inexpensive function. But the next day, I was going to prove that even silence has a limit, and that a mother's love, when it is used as an eternal debt, one day ceases to be affection, and it becomes strength. Want to know what was the first thing I did when the sun came up? So listen to what's next, because it was that morning that everything began to change, and there was no turning back. That night, sleep did not come. All that was left was the hum of silence, and the phrase hammering like a drop of water falling in the same place of the soul. "It only serves to pay our bills." It was as if that sentence had opened an old drawer inside me, where all the times I kept silent, all the checks signed with pain, all the invitations denied, all the solitudes disguised as "all right" were kept. I looked at the ceiling until 3 a.m. Then I got up slowly, like someone who was about to do something I should have done a long time ago. I sat in front of the computer with steady hands, without hesitation. I entered the bank's website. I took a deep breath, and I went straight to the additional cards. There they were. Their names, the limits, the latest expenses. There were so many digital signatures of mine authorizing that hurt. But even though it hurt, I clicked cancel, one by one. Then I went to the emergency account, the one I opened when Ryan was fired. It was joint. He wore it when it got tight, and it was always tight. I transferred what was left to my personal account, closed the joint. Then I changed all the passwords. From the bank account, the email, the streaming platform, even life insurance. For the first time in years, I logged in as if I was cleaning up not only their mess, but the emotional dirt that I myself let accumulate. The silence of the early morning helped. It was as if the city was protecting me. The houses were sleeping, the lights were off, and there I was, alone, but awake, conscious. Hooray, a different kind of life, one that didn't ask permission to exist. When I finished everything, I closed the computer and went to the kitchen. I prepared a chamomile tea and sat on the porch. Outside, the sky was still dark, but on the horizon there was already a clear trace, and I thought, that's what I am now, a trace of light in the middle of the night. The feeling was not one of revenge. It was a relief, as if I had come back to myself, as if I had finally learned to choose myself. And look, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story without flourishes, without a mask, If you're listening to me on the other side, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not out of vanity, it's just for me to know that there's someone walking with me on this road, because I still have a lot to tell you. And believe me, what happened after that dawn changed everything. Do you know that story about the restaurant? That shameful scene that my son tried to hide from everyone? That's that. The time is coming for you to know how he learned, the hardest way possible, that the account of ingratitude always arrives. At 9:15 in the morning, my phone rang. I was finishing my coffee, the same one, unsweetened, strong, just the way I like it. The cup was still warm in my hand when I saw his name light up on the screen. Ryan. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom!" His voice came sharp, trembling on the edge of panic. "I'm here at Oswego Grill, with Dana and her mom. No cards passed. None. The waiter has a frown, Mom. What's going on?" I was silent for 2 seconds. Then I spoke with the calm of someone who has finally learned to listen to himself. "The cards have been canceled, Ryan. Everyone." On the other side, silence. I almost heard the sound of the gears in his head trying to process. "What do you mean canceled? Mom, have you gone crazy? We're in a restaurant with people watching, with Dana's mother here. Shame on you." His voice was raised, not out of anger, but out of desperation. I, without changing my tone, replied, "I'm not your bank anymore." The air seemed to disappear from the phone. "You can't do this to me," he shouted. How do I explain this to Dana's mother-in-law? How do I pay this bill? I put the cup against the sink, looked out the window and said, "Now you know how I felt for 10 years. He tried to laugh, that nervous laugh of someone who wants to manipulate. "That's not fair, Mom. You could have warned us. You're acting like you're a stranger." And that's when I said, with a firmness that I had never used with him, "We become strange when we are no longer respected as mothers." The call was muted. I felt that he was looking for one last card to play, but he no longer had credence even in the argument. Finally, he said quietly, "Are you really doing this to us?" And I, looking at the clear sky that morning, replied, "No, I'm doing this for me." And I hung up, without shouting, without apologizing. For the first time, the power was not on the card. It was in my voice. And when I hung up that phone, it was as if I had also turned off a lifetime of servitude disguised as affection. But I knew that this was just the beginning, because when those who have always controlled realize that they have lost the key, starts knocking on the door harder. And what came next was exactly that. A desperate attempt to take back what was no longer theirs. Want to know how they tried to turn the tide? Well, get ready. Because there are people who, when they lose comfort, reveal the worst they have inside. They came in the late afternoon, when the sun was already beginning to set behind the trees in the yard. I was sitting on the back patio, listening to the sound of water from the small fountain I had installed with my bare hands, an old project that I was only able to finish after I stopped paying for the whims of others. The sound was soft, constant, like the heart of one who finally settles inside. I knew they would come. I knew from the moment I hung up the phone that morning. People who are used to everything easy can't stand losing control. First, I heard the tires braking too hard in front of my house. Then, the knocks on the door. They were not ordinary beats. They were demands. Fists that charged. "Mom! Mom! Open that door now!" It was Ryan. The voice changed between offended and childish. "You can't just disappear like that. We have to talk." I continued on the patio, with the still hot tea beside me, and the birds chirping as if the world wasn't exploding there in front of the house. Dana then shouted, "Do you have any idea what you did? You left us embarrassed. You're insensitive." The gate slammed. I heard footsteps coming from the side of the house, then the noise of someone trying to force the back handle. Locked, as it had been for months. How I was inside, locked up and learning to be at peace. "Mom, that's not you," Ryan would say, almost begging. "Are you being manipulated by someone? Are you sick?" I smiled inside. Funny how, when we impose ourselves, they soon think it's a disease. When we say no, they think we are confused. The truth is that they never imagined that I would have the courage to see myself as a priority. In the midst of all that shouting, I had a strange but clear thought. They're not knocking on the door for me. They are beating for the money. I stood up slowly. I walked to the side of the house without making a sound. The living room window was ajar, It was through her that I heard Dana say, in that mocking tone that she tries to disguise as sincerity, "Coward. That's what it is. An old coward." I stopped right behind the curtain. I took a deep breath. I opened the window firmly. She saw me. Our eyes met. And there, in that silent exchange, something in her trembled. I didn't say anything. I just closed the window calmly. Then I pulled back the curtain slowly, as if closing the backdrop of a play that has come to an end. And in that moment, I understood. The worst loneliness is not being left behind. It's about being present where no one sees you. And I'm tired of offering myself to those who only know how to demand. And look, if you've come this far with me, keep going. Because what comes ahead is the point where everything turns. That's when the story stops being mine. And it becomes a mirror for many people. Because it was right after this visit that they showed what they were really capable of. And so did I. Are you ready to know how far they went? So stay. Because the strongest, it's yet to come. The next day, the calls began. First it was Dana's mother-in-law, the same one who was at the restaurant during the embarrassment. A woman who barely looked at me at family gatherings, now came in a sweet, almost rehearsed voice. "Hi, dear. I learned that there was a misunderstanding yesterday. Are you not in need of help? Is everything okay with you?" I listened quietly. Misunderstanding. That's what they called years of exploration and a necessary cut. I responded politely, thanked her for her concern, and hung up before she could entangle me with that false maternal tone. Then it was the turn of my younger sister, who lives in Sacramento. She called in a hurry, saying that Ryan had looked for her. "Carolyn, he's devastated. He said you humiliated him, that you canceled everything suddenly. He was crying, my sister. Crying." I was silent. She continued, "You've never been like that. What's going on?" Inside, something in me burned. It wasn't anger. It was a mature, serene indignation. Because no one had called me to ask how I was in recent years. Nobody cared about the times I paid for their card and didn't buy my medicine. Of the nights when I felt like an intruder in my own son's house. But now that I've taken a stand, I've become the villain. I became the bitter old woman, the mother who freaked out, the unstable lady, turned off. One call after another, with different voices, all with the same message. Go back. Apologize. You've gone too far. And for the first time, I heard them all, in silence, without justifying myself. Because look, when we stop living to please others, the whole world tries to put us back on a leash. And that's when you find out who really saw you, and who only used you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been painted as the wrong one, just because you finally put a limit? Have you ever been called crazy, just because you got tired of being made of carpet? If so, comment here with a, "I know how it is," or "I understand you." Sometimes, knowing that there is someone on the other side who has gone through the same pain already changes the weight of silence. The messages continued for days. A cousin she hadn't seen for years sent a huge text on Facebook saying that family is everything and that money is not worth a blood relationship. I just thought, blood is a tie, not a chain, and I chose to break the chain. Because what they called a relationship was, in fact, an abusive contract where only I paid the price. And yet, even with all this pressure, I didn't give in. I didn't cry. I didn't answer. I just withdrew. And it was in this recollection that I discovered something valuable. That silence, when it comes beyond the limit, is not cowardice. It is freedom. But of course, they weren't going to stop there. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you what was the dirtiest scam they tried to give me. A scam that involved no money, but something even more precious. Something that, if I hadn't been strong, would have broken me for good. Want to know what it was? Then listen to me, because what's next? It will take your breath away. The house was silent. Not the pleasant silence of the late afternoon, but that kind of silence that weighs you down, that tightens the chest, that makes us hear even the sound of our own breathing as if it were strange. I was sitting at the living room table, with a box of documents next to me and the computer open. I decided to review everything. All extracts, all transfers, all receipts. It took me hours. Every click, every line I read was like rereading a part of my story that I didn't want to face. But I faced it, one by one. Credit card, direct debit, joint account, applications, services, I saw streaming payments that I didn't even watch, luxury gym memberships that were miles from my house, subscriptions to fashion magazines with my name, purchases in installments at expensive electronics stores. Everything, all in my name. The eyes were heavy. My head hurt. I took an old notebook and wrote down the values. I disappeared. Thrice. The total stared back at me as a sentence. $86,470. That was it. That's what had come out of my savings, my retirement, my sweat, right into their whims. And it was there, looking at that number, that something in me collapsed. But it wasn't sadness. It wasn't guilt. Clarity. The lucidity that comes when we no longer have an excuse to give to others, not even to ourselves. The lucidity of seeing that I was erased. Erased as a mother, as a woman, as a person. They didn't want me to be there. Just my job. And I fulfilled this function so well, for so long, that I didn't even realize that I was slowly being replaced by a bank account. I dropped the pencil in the notebook, got up slowly and went to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. For a moment, I didn't see wrinkles. I didn't see white hairs. I saw the woman who spent her whole life serving, waiting to be recognized. And there, right there, I said out loud, "Enough." I went back to the living room, opened the drawer where I keep my will, and reread it. Every line, every name. And for the first time I thought, what if I change everything? My heart beat faster. It was as if that sentence had ignited something dormant inside me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. About giving myself back the value they took from me. The will was symbolic, yes, but it was also real. It was the only thing they still expected from me, the only promise that kept them around. What if this promise ceased to exist? What would be left? Who would stay? I stood there, document in hand, staring out of the dark window, and I understood that I was not alone. I was in mourning, but not a mourning for someone who died. It was the mourning of the woman I was, from the mother who gave herself to the last drop, thinking that this was enough. The pain was deep, but it came clean. No hurt, only with the certainty that from then on, nothing would be the same as before, because what I discovered on that paper, in that sum, that night, it changed not only my present, but the course of their future. Do you want to know what I did with that will? Wait. Because the next chapter of this story is not just about signed paper. It is about restored dignity. And, they weren't prepared for it. I took that brown envelope, yellowed by time, where I kept the will I made 5 years ago. I remember well the day I signed it. I was in one of those moments when we confuse love with obligation. Ryan had just quit another job. Dana was pregnant with a baby that never came. And I, as always, wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, they wouldn't be helpless. I opened the envelope with steady hands. The ink was already beginning to fade in some places, but the strongest word still shone clearly. Sole heir. Ryan. House, car, savings account, applications, all in his name. Not a comma that mentioned my will, only the repetition of my guilt. And there I was, sitting in that same room where I spent the last few years transferring affection in the form of a paid bill, reading with different eyes of those who finally understood. Love without reciprocity becomes a contract of servitude, and servitude is an elegant way to die alive. I calmly closed the envelope, stood up, took my notebook, and wrote, "Call the lawyer." Called. The phone rang twice before Stephen's voice answered. He was the only one who always treated me with respect, never in a hurry. "Carolyn, what a pleasure to hear your voice. What can I help with?" I took a deep breath. "I want to make an appointment. I need to rewrite my will." There was a pause. "Of course. We may see each other next week. Will everything be okay with you by then?" Smile. For the first time in a long time, I could say, "Yes, it will be." I wrote down the date on the kitchen calendar. Monday at 3 p.m. in Beaverton. I closed the old will and put it back in the envelope. Not with regret, but as if sealing the end of a cycle. I knew that there was still something to come. They would kick, complain, maybe even threaten to abandon me, as if they hadn't done it years ago, even though they were around me. But there was a piece in me that could no longer be taken away, because at that moment, I wasn't just changing a document. I was regaining the right to be the author of my own story. That same day, I began to reorganize my life. I created a new financial spreadsheet. I listed the things I always wanted to do and never allowed myself. I researched gardening courses, watercolor classes. I sat on the porch with a strong tea and let the late afternoon light touch my face, not as a prize, but as rebirth. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, because there are people out there who need to know that there is still time. And if you are among them, you are. Because what I found out in the lawyer's office that week was greater than the change in the will. It was a key, and when she turned, she opened the door to something they never imagined losing. Want to know what it was? So hold on, because what's next? It touches right on their pride. She arrived on a gray Tuesday, dressed as someone who is going to an elegant tea, not to talk to a lady tired of being deceived. Claudia, Dana's mother, showed up at my door with a smile stretched out than the skin on her face. She had an expensive leather bag, sunglasses in her hair, and a perfume that arrived before her. When I opened the door, she was already entering, as if there was still intimacy between us. "Honey, I came because I think all this is becoming an unnecessary misunderstanding," she began, taking off her coat as if she were the owner of the house. "We can talk like civilized women, don't you think?" I sat on the couch without inviting her to do the same, but she sat anyway. She straightened her skirt, crossed her legs, and looked at me with that sweet look that we learn, over time, not to trust. "Look, about dinner, that was just a joke between women. You know how it is, don't you? We say a few things and end up being misunderstood." I remained silent, just watching. She continued. "Ryan is devastated. Dana then. She has barely been able to sleep. They love you, Carolyn. You know that. They are just confused. Young people. Pressured. And, let's be honest, you've always been counted on. You have always been the foundation of the family." It was at that moment that her voice began to lose its sugar, like a cup of tea that grows cold and bitter. "But your reaction, this abrupt cut, is generating a lot of concern. A lot." She leaned forward, looking into my eyes as if trying to hypnotize. "And I'm not just talking about social shame, see? There are already people thinking that you might be unstable, confused. Dana told me that you've been very lonely lately." A pause, and then the sentence. "They are considering pursuing legal means." I stared at her, motionless. The threat did not come with a knife. She came with lipstick, high heels, and a low voice. Unstable. That was the word she chose. The same one that so many people use to invalidate a woman when she decides to say enough is enough. I took a deep breath, rested my hands on my knees, and stood up slowly. I went to the bookshelf, got an old photo. Me, Ryan, and my husband, on his graduation day. I gave it to her. That was my son. A boy who looked me in the eyes. A man who promised to protect me after his father was gone. She looked at the photo with disdain. "And now, Claudia, now I'm looking at you. And I tell you with all the firmness I have left, I am more lucid than ever." I took the photo back and put it back in place. She was unresponsive for a few seconds. She got up, straightened her blouse, grabbed her bag in a hurry. The smile was no longer there. "You're going to regret that, Carolyn. I just wanted to avoid that things worsened." I accompanied him to the door, opened it, and replied with the same serenity of someone who discovered that he owes nothing to anyone. "Things only get worse when we keep pretending they are not wrong." She left without looking back, and I closed the door without weight on my chest. But I stood there for a few minutes, because despite my calmness, I knew that the war was now different. If before they wanted my money, now they wanted my wits, the narrative, the image, reputation, and I would have to prove that I was not weak, nor alone. And you know, it is precisely here that the story begins to take a turn that even I did not imagine, because from where you least expect it, unexpected strength can come. Do you want to know where mine came from? Wait, because in the next chapter, even I was surprised by who showed up, and with what he brought in his hands. The clinic was on a quiet street in Beaverton, surrounded by yellow trees in early fall. I parked the car alone, as I have always done all my life, and stayed there for a few minutes before entering. It was curious. I was 68 years old, a lifetime of experience, a grief that hadn't yet healed properly, and yet I was about to prove to a stranger that my mind was still mine. That's what hurt me, having to prove it. But between pride and caution, I chose caution. I entered, made the form, and was received by a psychologist with a serene look, named Dr. Angela Miller. He was no more than 40 years old, but he looked at me with the respect of someone who knows he is in front of someone who has seen more than what books teach. She explained to me that she would do some cognitive tests: memory, attention, executive functions. I nodded. "Let's get started," I said. And we started. There were almost 2 hours of questions, logic activities, remembering and organization exercises, all done with patience. In the end, she offered me tea and asked us to talk. "Mrs. Carolyn, now I'd like to hear your story. What brought you here?" That's when I let go of the breath that had been stuck for days. I told him everything, from the little help to Ryan and Dana, to the day of humiliation at lunch. I spoke without crying, but with pain throbbing in every sentence. I didn't dramatize it. I just told, as someone who finally accepts that she has been hurt. Angela listened to me in silence. I wrote down some things. Other times I just watched myself. When I finished, she closed the notebook and said firmly, "You are in perfect condition. Cognitively, emotionally, rationally. Everything indicates that he is making decisions with full awareness and balance. In fact, many people, in the face of what you have experienced, would be collapsing. His posture is admirable." I thanked him silently. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just felt an internal confirmation. It was no longer just me saying I was lucid. Now it was official. Signed. Documented. She handed me the report. A closed, stamped envelope ready to be used if needed. I left the clinic walking slowly. The wind swayed the dry leaves on the sidewalk. And there, on that sidewalk, I realized how some memories mark us forever. He has pains that do not go away. There are words that remain, but there are also moments of justice that become light in our dark days. Tell me something. Do you on the other side keep any memory that still pulsates inside? Good or bad? The kind that shaped who you are? If you do, write here in the comments. I want to read it. Sometimes sharing a piece of our history helps someone else understand their own. And as I was returning home with that envelope in the passenger seat, I knew. I knew they didn't expect this. They thought I was going to shut up, that I was going to give in. But now, I was armed with the truth. And what came after was the first shakeup in the structure that they had been trying so hard to maintain. Because when the lie finds a signed paper, the game changes, and how it has changed. Are you ready to see what broke after that? Because I was, and I went to the end. It was Lucy who came up with the idea, as she always did when she felt I needed to breathe. My neighbor, my friend, my soul sister, those who don't ask, only show up with the key in their hand and the suitcase half ready. 5 days, Carolyn. Only 5. A cruise from Seattle. We share a simple cabin without luxury, but with sea, wind, and a buffet that they say is worth every calorie. I laughed. I hadn't laughed in a while. She looked at me with that look of someone who knows our sorrows even before we tell them. You've done a lot for everyone. Now let someone else do it for you. Accepted. I didn't even think about it. I think I already knew that I needed to get out of myself for a few days. We drove to Seattle. The port was full, busy, and for the first time in months, I felt small in a good way. In the crowd, nameless, functionless. I entered the ship as if I were entering another time. And it was. Another time. Another version of me. On the first night, we walked around the deck. The cold wind hit my face, and I felt my skin alive again. For dinner, we ate smoked salmon with a glass of white wine that gave me warmth in my cheeks. Laughed. We talked to other women, all over 60, all with stories that seemed to come out of my own mouth. One of them, Margaret, said that she supported her ex-husband for 12 years after the separation. He said he couldn't work because of anxiety, but I barbecued every weekend. Another, named Ruth, revealed that her daughter had forbidden her to see her grandchildren after she refused to sell the house. And there, at that dinner full of confidences, a very elegant lady named Arlene said with a sigh, "I thought it was just me." That crossed me. I thought it was just me. As if our pains had to be hidden so that the world would see us as the good old women, available, generous. But there, with all those women, I realized that the pain was collective, the silence, shared, but the decision to break up, this was still rare, and I had made that decision. Me, Carolyn. And on that ship, between laughter, desserts, and confessions. I began to find parts of myself that I thought had died. I walked alone on deck one morning, with the sun rising red on the horizon. I remembered when I was a girl and dreamed of traveling the world. And there, between the sky and the sea, I thought, there is still time. Not for everything, but to be happy in a simple way, in my own way. On the last day, I sat on the balcony of the cabin with Lucy, and we were silent, only the noise of the sea. And then she said, "You're back. The woman who lives inside has returned." I closed my eyes and let that sentence rest on me like a warm blanket. I came home different, lighter, stronger, more. And I had no idea that while I was smiling, looking at the sea, a letter had been left in my mailbox. And its content? It was going to prove to me that my decision moved deeper than I imagined. Do you want to know what was written? So hold on. Because what came inside that envelope was the beginning of the confession they never imagined making. Stephen's office smelled of old leather and closely guarded paper. There was a calm inside that made me breathe deeper, as if every decision made in that place had weight, history. He greeted me with that discreet smile of someone who knows he is about to witness a necessary cut, one of those that does not hurt, but liberates. We sat facing each other, and he slid the papers to me. "Do you want to read it aloud?" he asked. I wanted to, because I needed to hear my own voice saying, without trembling, everything I had kept for years as an uncomfortable secret in my chest. I took a deep breath. "I declare, of my own free will, that after my death, 50% of my assets, including real estate, financial investments, and savings, will be directed to the North Haven Foundation, which works in defense and support of abandoned elderly people in the state of Oregon." I paused. His voice was still firm. "I also declare that 30% of my estate will go to my sister Judith Margaret Allen, a resident of Missoula, Montana, in recognition of her silent love and the absence of any lifelong demands or expectations." I swallowed. Judith was always there, never asking me for anything, never making me feel less for having given too much to others. And the remaining 20% will be left to my son, Ryan Thomas Allen, conditional on proof of at least 2 consecutive years of financial independence, including an annual income tax report, proof of personal income, and no debts linked to my name. I signed each page with a new tranquility, which I had never felt before. Stephen looked at me with respect. "Carolyn, you are not punishing. You are educating. It is creating an opportunity for a new beginning, including for him." I smiled. A small smile, but full of world. That's what I needed. Stop being hostage to what I felt, and start acting for what I deserve. He handed me a certified copy and shook my hand firmly. I left there with the sun already going down and a thin breeze touching my face. In the car, I left the papers on the passenger seat. I looked at them for a moment. I didn't see numbers, names, or percentages. I saw a new beginning. Of my soul, of my value. And if you've spent your whole life doing everything for others, without asking yourself what's left for you, maybe you know what I'm talking about. But what I didn't expect, by any means, was that New Testament would end up falling into the wrong hands. And what did they do to him? It almost took my breath away. Want to know how he was discovered? So wait. Because when the mask fell, there was no turning back. The message arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was watering my hydrangeas. "Can we have a coffee, just the two of us?" It was Dana's. I only read it once. I put the cell phone in the pocket of my apron and continued to wet the sheets carefully, as if that gesture helped me organize my thoughts. After everything, after the silence, the letter, the veiled threats, now she wanted to talk. Accepted. We booked it in a small cafe in downtown Portland, one of those that serve more silence than sugar. I chose a table in the corner, facing the window. I saw when she arrived. Alone. No makeup, no shine. The simplest clothes, the eyes sunken, as if the weight of the world had finally landed on her. He sat in front of me bluntly. "Thank you for coming." I just nodded. She sighed. "Carolyn, I wanted to start by saying that I'm sorry. Very much so. For everything. We were silent for a while. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response you can give." She continued. "That day at the restaurant, when the cards didn't go through, it was a shock, but it was also a strange relief. For the first time, we had to look at reality." She fiddled with the spoon inside the cup nervously. "We made our first budget. We sat down, Put everything on paper. We are spending more than double what we earn. We live as if money were infinite, as if you were infinite. I stared at her. And you thought I was? She lowered her eyes. I don't think we ever thought about it. Alone. Used. That was said with an embarrassment that I felt even on the other side of the table. Do you think you have hope for rebuild something between us? She asked, her voice almost cracking. I took a deep breath. I looked to the side, watching an elderly couple laughing with 2 grandchildren at the next table, and I replied, not with the old terms. She looked at me surprised. I don't hate you, Dana, but I love myself enough now to never go back to that position. If there is ever something between us again, it will have to be built with respect, not with receipts. She nodded, without arguing. For the first time, he did not try to reverse anything. He just listened. We finished breakfast in silence, and when she got up to leave, she held my arm for a second. Thank you for still listening to me. I just said, listening doesn't mean accepting, but it's a start. And I saw her leave with lighter steps than the ones she entered. Life sometimes takes these unexpected turns. But, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because the biggest lesson I learned in all of this is that dignity is not negotiable. If it was lost, it is because there never really was. But what Dana didn't know, in that cafe, it's just that the next meeting wouldn't be with her. It would be with his own son. And what he said, it moved me in a way that still echoes inside me today. He arrived on a Saturday morning, alone. He didn't even send a message before. He rang the bell and stood there, with his hands in his pockets, like a boy who had done something wrong and knew. When I opened the door, we stared at each other for a few seconds that seemed too long. He looked smaller, not physically, but in posture. The pride that was always stamped on his chest had given way to a timid, almost broken humility. Can I get in a bit? He asked. I nodded. He went in, sat on the sofa in the living room, in the same place where he had already spread so many times without asking permission. But this time, he carefully adjusted himself, as if the fabric could refuse his weight. Dana told me about the coffee, and I wanted to come alone, say a few things. I sat in the armchair, facing him, my hands crossed in my lap. He took a deep breath. We paid for car insurance yesterday, with a personal loan. Interest rates are high, but that's what we have. We canceled the gym, the one of luxury. We should have done this a long time ago. Paused. We are moving. To Milwaukee. A simpler apartment, 30% cheaper. Minor. No balcony. He spoke slowly, looking at me and at the floor. I grew up, Mom. I grew up badly. I grew up crooked. I thought that being an adult was paying bills, but with other people's money. He closed his eyes. With your money. I kept silent. I let him hear his own guilt echo in the room. The worst part, it's realizing that we only change when we lose. And I lost the right to be taken care of by you, because I treated you like a bank. As a shield. How function. Those words crossed me, but in a different way now. They didn't hurt like before. They were blades, yes, but clean, open, surgical. I was pretending to be an adult, while you paid the bill, literally. And when the card didn't go through at the restaurant, it wasn't just an embarrassment. It was as if the world had shown me the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. He looked up. I didn't come to ask for anything. I just came to tell you that, because I know that, even with everything, you were always the only person who really listened to me. I took a deep breath. I didn't get up to hug him. I didn't even say that everything was fine, because it wasn't. But it wasn't that hot rage either. It was something else. A calm recognition, as if he had finally touched the ground. Maybe that's the first thing you really pay, your own responsibility, I said. He nodded. And before leaving, he asked, do you think there's still a way back? I was silent for a few seconds. Life always has, but not in the same ways. He understood. It came out slowly. And when the door closed, I stood there for a while, feeling a new kind of emptiness. An emptiness that no longer hurt, but that reminded me that something, in fact, had changed. And look, if you've come this far with me, know one thing. The most memorable moment in this story is yet to come. Because all I've done so far is rebuild my side. But when the day came to tell all this, in front of them, in front of everyone, you'll see, and you will feel it along with me. because it was there that justice took shape, and no one expected it. It was a shy, sunny Sunday, with that chill that only Portland knows how to do at the end of October. I received the invitation by message 3 days before. "Mom, we want to have you for lunch at the new apartment. Just us, just home-cooked food." I read and reread, breathed. I replied with a simple, "I'll be there." I went without haste, without a gift, without a reinforcement lunchbox, without envelopes of money hidden in my purse. I took only myself. I arrived and recognized the new building from afar. Simple, without a doorman, with external stairs. Ryan appeared in the hall with messy hair and an apron smeared with sauce. "It's all kind of improvised, but it's with affection," he said, opening the door. Entered. The apartment was small, with repurposed furniture, simple curtains, and a lit candle on the table. Dana came from the kitchen with 2 dishes. He was wearing jeans and a basic t-shirt. No makeup. But the look, it was another. Calmer. Cleaner. I sat at the table. Ryan served a pasta with vegetables and tomato sauce. "I did it," he said, a little embarrassed. "We have been cooking together. Learning. Eat." We talked about the weather, about the change, about the noise of the neighbor upstairs. No mention of money. No order. No tension hanging in the air. Only coexistence. After lunch, we had black tea with cookies that Dana said burned a bit, but I found them delicious. We sat there in comfortable silence. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel the weight of having to make up for anything. Just being there was enough. When I got up to leave, Ryan walked me to the door. He opened it carefully, as if that gesture meant more than just leaving. He looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you for not opening the door that day, when we went to confront you." Smile. It was the first time I opened it to myself, and I left, walking slowly through the streets of Milwaukee, among trees with orange leaves falling like confetti from the weather. There, I understood, the justice that time does not scream. She whispers in the silence of a simple lunch, in the absence of demand, in the re-encounter with the essential. But I still had one last thing to do, something I had kept for myself, and that now needed to be said, not for them, but for myself, and for whoever else carried the same weight that once bent my back. Do you want to know what it was? So hold on tight, because the outcome comes now, and he's not about them. It's about me. The sun had not yet fully broken through the sky when I stepped out with the watering can in my hand. The lawn was still damp from the serene of dawn, and the hydrangeas, my companions of so many seasons, were more alive than ever. Deep blue, delicate purples, some still opening as if they had woken up with me. I knelt down slowly, as I do every morning, and let the water run down the roots, with the patience of someone who is no longer in a hurry to prove anything else to anyone. There, in that garden, was where it all began, and where everything returned to its place. I remembered the afternoon when I heard that phrase. It is only good for paying our bills. Like an arrow shot carelessly, but accurate. I remembered the dawn when I got up as someone who gets up from his own emotional death, from steady clicks when canceling cards, from Dana's eyes, apologizing, from Ryan's trembling voice, confessing that he had never been a real adult. I remembered the cruise, from the salty breeze on his face, of the loose laughter with women who had also been forgotten by their own children. I remembered the evaluation with the psychologist, from the report saying that I was sane, lucid, rational, as if I needed a paper to know what was already pulsing strongly in my chest. I remembered the old will, of how I signed that paper out of blind love, and how 5 years later, I signed another, out of self-love. Each memory came with a color, a smell, a sound, but none of them were guilty, just firmness. I hadn't screamed. I didn't slam doors. I didn't dress in revenge. My silence was my response. My absence, a lesson. My no was the most loving word I ever said to myself. Aging, I learned, is not being discarded. It is to be refined. It's choosing what stays and what doesn't come in. And that morning, kneeling among flowers, I had the clarity that only time gives. It wasn't me who became cold. I was the one who stopped erasing myself for others. Because the truth is that for a long time I loved more than I was loved, and that made me believe that I should deserve crumbs. But time is a master at returning the value of those who have been devalued. I watered my hydrangeas, but I felt like I was watering myself, and for the first time, I felt that everything was as it should be, but there was still one thing missing. A gesture. A final decision that would seal, once and for all, my freedom. And that would show, to anyone who wanted to see, that silent woman at the bottom of the garden, it had just bloomed completely. Want to know what it was? So wait, because it is now that everything falls into place. That afternoon, as the golden leaves of autumn danced on the front sidewalk, I saw Lucy arriving with an apple pie covered in an embroidered cloth. She smiled as if she knows exactly what the other needs, and it was just presence. We sat on the porch, the two of us with steaming cups of tea, speaking softly, as if every word had to respect the silence conquered. We talked about life, the turns it takes, and how we only learn the value of a chair when we spend too much time standing. The phone rang. I didn't expect it, but I answered. It was Ryan. He didn't say much. She only asked, "Is everything okay there, Mom?" And I, looking at the reddish sky, replied in the most serene voice that has ever come out of me, "Yes, son. Around here everything is peaceful." And it was true, because today, I am no longer anyone's help, nor the emotional vault of an unprepared family. I'm just me. That's it. Enough is enough. If I could leave one thing for you who have accompanied me here, it would be this. Never think that it is too late to change your story. Age is not an end. It is a filter. Everything that is alive flows. Everything that is true love remains. We spend our whole lives trying to deserve a place in others, and forget that the greatest place that exists is the one we occupy inside us. I went down. I went to the bank. I was invisible. But now, it's me. And I've never been so whole. If this story touched you in any way, if you felt like you could be your aunt, your grandmother, your mother, or even yourself, thank you for staying here. His listening was like a mute embrace in this old soul that still pulsates. Enjoy this video, if you can. It's a small gesture for you, but for me, it's like a warm blanket on a cold morning. And if you want to come back for more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. I always leave the coffee past and my heart open. Tell me here in the comments which city you are watching. I want to meet you, to know where this beautiful listening comes from. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.